What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Lerone Martin joining you from Stanford University on Talk Shop Live. And I'm so excited to talk about my new book, Young King, which drops on Tuesday, May 5th. It's a book about Martin Luther King Jr., a book that's never been written about him before, that includes new information, new photos that have rarely been seen, and information that helped, and not how the man became famous, but how the man became the man, how Martin Luther King Jr., the boy, became a man. So the book chronicles not those events that made him famous, but the books that made him the man he became. And I'm so excited to be on Talk Shop Live to be talking about the book. You can get signed copies of the book. If you are watching on Talk Shop Live, click the shop button. If you're on Facebook, comment the word shop for links to the order. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the link in the description if you'd like to get a signed copy of the book. So I'm really excited to be here and to be with all of you. We have a question coming in from Jason. Appreciate you, Jason. The question is, what made you want to focus on Martin Luther King Jr.'s early life instead of the part of his story everyone already knows? Great question. I decided to focus on the early part, Jason, because of two reasons. On the professional side, I started my new job here at Stanford as the Martin Luther King Jr. Centennial Professor and Director of the King Papers Project. And I got a chance to start seeing documents that I'd never really seen, and reading books about King. And one of the things that I came across were these letters that King sent home while he was in Connecticut at 15 years old, picking tobacco, working on a tobacco farm. And the letters, King talked about how amazed he was to be in an environment that didn't have Jim Crow signs for the first time. So as I started digging more into King being in Connecticut, I found out that's the first time we have on record that King ever preached. And then when King applied to seminary, he wrote, it was the summer he spent in Connecticut that made him start to begin to think he might be called to the ministry. So that professional encounter really grabbed me. And then on a personal level, I decided to write on this because I became a father. And I started thinking about what goes into shaping young people and to making young people, children, to grow up to be caring adults, adults that care about others, adults that want to serve, adults that want to make the world a better place. So I thought about how my parents raised me. Then I thought about how other people are raised. And so I obviously, as being the King professor, I thought about how was King raised. So that really drew me, Jason, to really want to think about, you know, what went into making this young man. So I think that that was what I was really excited about. So I really appreciate your question. Chandra, how are you? Chandra, I hope I'm saying that right. Chandra asked, is it true he wasn't always a standout student? That honestly makes him feel more relatable. Can you talk about that? You are absolutely right. I have two chapters that chronicle King's academic struggles at Morehouse, most of which I'm gathering from his report cards, which we have at the King Institute, and also from testimony from his professors. Many of them say that he struggled. And the thing that's important is that other biographers have talked about, that King was lazy, or this is why his grades weren't good. But all his professors say that King tried extremely hard, that he was a very earnest student. But he was young. He went to college at 15 years old, and he was coming from a public school system in Atlanta that wasn't the best at the time. It was segregated, it was underfunded. So all his professors say that he really struggled. The only class he got an A in Morehouse was this class on Bible, and he says that class transformed his life, by Professor George Kelsey. But he graduated with like a 2.4 GPA, and part of that was because he was so young, and also he just wasn't prepared. King will say himself in an editorial, when he got to Morehouse at 15, he said he was reading about in an eighth grade level. So it makes him more relatable, as you pointed out, but it also shows us how hard he worked and how dedicated he was to being a better student and being a better citizen. And so by the time he's in his second year of his master's program, King is getting A's and becomes the student body president in his third year of his master's program. Let's see. Love the questions. Angela asked, "What's one surprising thing you learned about Martin Luther King Jr. that most people don't know?" I think that he went to Connecticut and he picked tobacco to get money for tuition. And while he was there that summer, we have evidence that we know for a fact that Malcolm X was also in that area that summer. So imagine that King is 15, Malcolm's 19. King is there working to pick tobacco. Malcolm is traveling around these farms in the Northeast to sell suits. He's working for a tailor. And there are several young men who are on the farm where Martin King was and in the surrounding areas who say they bought suits from Malcolm. And the Morehouse newspaper says that all the Morehouse men came home that summer, that the summer King was there. They all had brand new suits. So one of the things that I realized was that Martin and Malcolm were in the same space. Now, whether or not they actually met, whether or not Malcolm tried to sell young King a suit, we don't know, but we do know they were in the same place at the same time. And it's just fascinating to think about. Here, these two men were 15 and 19, who would go on to help shape America. Were like two ships passing in the night, right? They were so close at that time, both in Connecticut, both on the same farm, but moving in different directions. So that was really, really exciting to learn. And then other thing I'll say that I learned, Angela, was just about the different women that King dated as a youngster. There were a number of women, including the Miss Maroon and White when he was a student at Morehouse. She was at Spelman, and that's the woman that King's family originally wanted him to marry. So learning about this, learning about a young man growing up, trying to figure out love in his late teens, early 20s, a lot like a lot of us, just trying to figure it out. So those were some exciting things that I learned. Shout out to Gina Lee. Thanks for the question. I'm curious about the early experiences with racism. Were there specific moments that really changed him at a young age? Great question. Yes. King says that one of the things that changed him, the first encounter, the first memory he has about racism is when he's around 6 years old. And his sister Christine talks about it as well. She says that King says that he had these friends he played with. They lived across the street. Well, they worked across the street. Their parents owned a store across the street. Best of friends. King said they played basketball, they wrestled, they ran around the neighborhood together. But then when it came time for them to go to school, the white children, their parents told King that their children could never play with him again because he was an N-word. And King says that's his earliest memory of racism. And he goes home and tells his mother he's crying. And his mother tells him something that he remembers the rest of his life and preaches. And he tells him, "You are as good as anybody. Never lose your somebodyness." And King will use that phrase for the rest of his life. And so that moment is really important for King because he says he started to feel in his heart, he started to hate people, started to hate white people because of what happened to him. He thought, why did I have to lose my best friend because my skin color is different? A question that any child would ask. And King says that's a really pivotal moment for him. He wrestles with hate for a long time and eventually chooses love and chooses to believe in the I am somebody message. And it helps give us the Martin Luther King Jr. we have today. Sloan, appreciate your question. Sloan wants to know, how do you think MLK's upbringing influenced his leadership style later on? And great question. I think King is shaped very much so, and I try to do a good job in this book of telling the story. He's shaped by the women in his life heavily. He's shaped by his grandmother, who he calls Mama. She gives him a sense of fashion and dignity. He's shaped by his aunt Ida, who reads books to him, and encyclopedias, dictionaries. Christine says King learns his love of books from his aunt Ida. And he's shaped, of course, by his father being a pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And in terms of leadership, that's probably the most lasting influence because he sees his father being a man, being a head of a church. And that really shapes King in thinking about how leadership should be. He really, at this time in his life, really sees men being out in front and leading. Now, Coretta will say King told her when they were dating that he believed that women could do anything men could, that they could lead, they could do whatever they want to do, that as well as any man. But for him, is what Coretta says. He says, for him, he preferred his wife to be at home and waiting on him and being the head of all the domestic affairs. So he's shaped very much so by the women in his life. He knows that women are capable, but for his own personal life, Coretta says that Martin made it very clear he expected her to stay home. Kent asked the question: the Connecticut tobacco farm part sounds fascinating. How did leaving the Jim Crow South impact his perspective? Great question, Kent. King writes home in a letter. He literally says when he's gets to Connecticut, he's 15. He writes in a letter, "Mom and Dad, I never thought a person of my race would be able to go to any restaurant he wanted to go to. But today I went to the finest restaurant in Hartford, Connecticut." I mean, think about that. 15 years old and saying, I never thought I'd be able to do this. And then he says later on in another letter, I'm seeing things I never thought someone of my race would ever see. So his friends say that being in Connecticut that summer, he starts calling it God's country. Like, this is how we're meant to live. And they say that he starts feeling guilty and constantly talking about it in the dorm room at night when they're all there looking up at the stars on the farm. He starts saying, why can't people that I know in the South have this experience? And so in many ways, King's dream about what it means to have access to public accommodations on an equal level, on an equal playing field, really starts to bubble up in Connecticut. And again, he'll write when he applies to seminary that's the moment, that summer on the farm is when he starts thinking about going into the ministry, and he starts feeling called to the ministry. So I try to chronicle that in the book, Young King here. And again, thanks for joining me. If you would like to get a signed copy of the book, it's available here on Talk Shop Live. You can hit the shop button. If you're watching on our Facebook page, you can comment the word shop for links to get a signed copy. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, our YouTube channel, you can click in the description. Let's see. Megan, appreciate your question, Megan. Can you tell us about King's childhood friends? How did they shape the man he became? King talks about, again, the formative experience of losing his white friends early on and how that shaped him heavily, shaped his first introduction about race. But King also has a cast of characters that he hangs out with by the time he's a preteen and a teenager, and they all got nicknames for each other. There's a Rile Rooster. There's a gentleman who goes by the name of, his name is William Combs, but they call him Pickles. And all these guys, they all have nicknames, and they all play basketball together. Emmett Weasel Proctor. So they got this whole little crew of guys in the neighborhood, and they all play basketball together at the Butler Street YMCA. And here's the funny part. They tell the story that, and King's coach affirms this in local newspapers at the time in the 1940s, that Martin Luther King Jr., wait for it, right, was an absolute ball hog on the basketball court. They gave him a nickname. His nickname was Will Shoot, because they said every time he touches the ball, he will shoot. So his friends jokingly used to get on him about not passing and being a ball hog. And they would say to him, like, why did you take that shot? And King would say, because I felt like shooting. So it took King a little while to understand the importance of teamwork. And it's something he discovers later in life. And by the time he gets to Morehouse and is playing intramural basketball with that same crew of friends, they say that he's a much more team-oriented basketball player. So he had a group of friends that they all used to play basketball, and they had a great time. And they all actually say, for a period of time that I chronicle in here, that King actually, would fight. He went from being a youngster who wouldn't fight, refused to fight, didn't like violence, to the point where his father would say in newspapers and interviews that he's so ashamed of this that he threatens King, like, if you come home from school one more time and haven't been beat up, like, you're gonna have to face me. After the death of King's grandmother, he was his first person that died that was close to him, he goes through a period that he calls himself, that I chronicle in the book, of general rebellion. And one of those ways he rebels is like getting in fights. And his friends say that he was really strong. He used to challenge people to wrestling matches, playing football, and so he goes through this period, like a lot of young adults, testing boundaries and being angry about the loss. But all his friends are there for that, and they're all there to hang out with him. And these are the same friends that will eventually tell him, "You're fighting this thing about going into the ministry, and we all see it, man. Like you're gifted. You should say yes and go into the ministry." So these are the friends who've watched him grow, and that's like all of us, right? When you have friends, they watch you grow and watch you change, and they stick by you, and they love you enough not to lie to you. And they didn't lie to him. They told him, "You need to go into the ministry." Again, talking about the new book here, Young King. Thank you for joining us joining me on Talk Shop Live. If you want to get a signed copy of the book, just click the shop button here on Talk Shop Live. You'll have access to get a signed copy of the book, which comes out May 5th. I'm so excited. If you're watching on Facebook, comment the word shop and you'll get a link for that. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, you can click the link in the description to get a signed copy of the book. All right, so Michelle wants to know what can young people today learn from MLK before he became a global icon, which I can also tie into what Megan would like to know, which is what do you want your kids to take away from this story? Oh man, it's a beautiful question, Michelle. So I'll answer it in one way. Let me answer it this way. What I want kids to take from this book is that King was able to, even with flaws and challenges, what makes King Martin Luther King Jr. is his commitment, is that King just remains committed. He knows what he wants to do, and that is he wants to make an impact on his community. He doesn't know what's the best vehicle to do that, what's the best vocation, but he just stays committed to wanting to do the right thing to change his community. And I think that's what I want my children to remember in this book is that, it's about remaining committed. It's about, even when you mess up, remaining committed, learning from your mistakes. This is what King does in this book so well. That's what I want my kids to take. What I want parents to take from this book as the lesson I'm teaching myself is that allow kids to mess up, realize that they're going to mess up, and the best thing we can do is try to help them learn from those mistakes. And I think that that's what I want my kids to take away, and I want parents to take away. So lesson I'm telling myself every day as I watch my boys I have a preteen, I got a teenager, preteen, and then a toddler, right? Don't ask. And I watching them go through all that is a lesson for me, is that they're going to mess up. The important thing is for us as parents and guardians to be there to help them learn from those mistakes. So thank you for your question, Michelle. Robert would like to know what part of researching this book impacted you personally the most? At this stage of my life, Robert, I appreciate this. It is King's relationship to his father. It's learning about how, at times, as King's father will say, both in published and unpublished materials, that he just wants to protect his kids. And he says that at times, knowing that violence can happen at any time and that the kids can be harmed, he says that it was like a balled up fist was inside of him all the time. And at times, he realizes he was tough on them because he wanted to protect them. And I think that hit me the most in writing this book at this point in my life, because I wrestle with the same thing on a personal level, right? Like how do you protect your kids, but also allow them to make mistakes so that they can learn and grow? Experience failure, right? It's like muscles, right? You got to push muscles when you're working out to the point of failure so they can grow. It's the same thing I think with children, but also wanting to protect them. Like how do I do that? And so I think, Robert, to be honest with you, that's what hit me the most in writing the book. Thank you for that question. Mary wants to know, what are 3 questions you'd ask Dr. King today if you could? Oh man. Mary, I've dreamt about this, so you're like in my dreams. I think the first question I would ask him is like, what kept you going? Like how did you remain committed? Like what did you do? You know, was it prayer? Was it meditation? Was it fasting? Like how did you keep going? I think the second question I would ask him is what lessons does he have for young people today? What lessons does he have from what he went through? What would he like to pass on to young adults today? What would he want them to know about not just his success, but also his failures? What lesson would he want to teach? And I think selfishly, I might ask him, like, what do you think of this? What do you think? What do you think? Did I get it right? You know, like what did I get it right? Did I land on the right thing? Do you recognize yourself in this book? I think selfishly I'd probably ask him that. I appreciate that, Mary. Laura, what's up, Laura? Laura wants to know, I didn't realize he was into things like fashion and dating. How important is it to see that more human side of him? I think it's so important because too often I think our heroes, Laura, are put on a pedestal and they seem unreachable. And makes us feel like the things that they did are unobtainable for us. But if we can see them in their very human side, right? Then it lets us see that they're relatable and that if they were able to do great things, that we can too, that they can be even more inspirational for us. Not just something that we look at and look up and say, like, wow, they're so special and I could never do that. No, you realize that they like fashion and they wrestle with insecurity, as I talk about in the book, where King talks about his own insecurities. And you wrestle with questions about what to do with my life. What should I do with the next step? I'm in college or I've got a degree and I don't know what to do. Even the people we look up to wrestled with this. And that was the whole point of this book, of writing about King the man, not King the icon. Was It was so important because greatness, as I like to say in this book, it isn't born, right? It's built. And I try to point out in this book that King was great because he was built, right, by his community, by his family, by his friends, by his loved ones. And if King was that way, then we can be too. We can use our gifts, whatever they may be. We may not be able to preach, may not be able to sing, but there's something that we have. There's a gift that we've been given from God, from the creator, from the universe, that allow us to serve others. And if King was able to do it, we can too. So I think that's one of the things that's really important, um, Laura, because I really wanted to make King human so they can inspire people, to bring him down to our level, right? So then we can all be inspired to go up. I just want to say again, thank you for joining me. Again, we're talking about this book, my book, Young King, which comes out on May 5th on Tuesday, and I'm really excited to be talking about it. If you're watching us right now on Talk Shop Live, you can click the shop button, and you'll get a chance to get a signed autographed copy of the book from me. If you're watching on Facebook, comment on the word shop for the links to get the order. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can look in the description and you can see where you can get a signed copy of the book. You can follow us on Instagram. Follow me. I'm at Lerone Martin on Instagram. And we have also our King Institute Instagram as well, where we post things about King's life, as we are the institute that's in charge of overseeing his papers. So, all right, let's get back to the Q&A. Julian asks, why is this book especially important to read right now? Julian, I think it's so important right now because of what our country is going through. It's important to remind us that institutions are so important in helping to shape the lives of young adults, right? King doesn't come out of a vacuum. He comes out of being shaped by institutions in his community, whether it's church, whether it's the local YMCA, it's a boys club, it's club basketball, it's universities. All of these things shape him. And it's important for us that as our institutions in some circles are being decimated, I think it's important to realize that institutions shape human beings, right? And human beings can then shape their communities. So I think it's important to read that. I think it's also important to read it right now is because there seems to be this moment, I think, for young adults that I teach, where they think heroes have to be perfect. And I think it's important to read this book right now, because it reminds them that heroes aren't perfect. They just have perfect commitment. They just remain committed. And I think it's important to read this book right now. And finally, I would say it's important, Julian, because we're really in a battle in our country right now about history, about what history can be taught. And we have to make sure that we're clear about teaching history in this country, even when it's painful. And I tell stories in here where King encounters the pain of racism as a young person. And this is not to drown in that pain, right? Baldwin said that, right, to accept one's past, one's history is not the same thing as drowning in it. It's learning how to use it. And what I hope this book does is, again, give us a context for King, be real about the racism he encountered, and then figure out what we need to do with it, right? We need to learn from this history so we don't repeat it. So I think those are the reasons why it's really important to read this book right now. Thanks for that question. Kendall, how you doing, Kendall? Kendall wants to know if you could describe young MLK in 3 words, what would they be? Oh man. Um, Searching. I'd say searching is the first thing. Every single part of this book, it's got 5 parts, and all of them start with the word finding. And I think it's because King is always on a search, like all of us. He's on a search for meaning. He's on a search for a vocation. He's on a search for himself. He's in a search for trying to figure out who he wants to be. And then he's in search of a life partner. So I think one word I would say, Kendall, is searching. I think another word I would use is committed. Like he's just committed. He doesn't know what he wants to be. He wants to be like most of us when he's a kid. He wants to be a fireman. As he gets older, he says he wants to be a physician. Then he says he wants to be a lawyer. Then eventually a minister. But I think all of that tells us not only is he always searching, but he's just committed to figuring out what am I going to be when I get older that's going to help me shape my community and help me change the world that I live in. So I would say the other word I would say about him is committed. Finally, I would say, ironically, is I would say the last word I would say is transforming. He's a person who transformed. He goes from not wanting to fight to then as a teenager getting into fights, then later on being really committed to nonviolence. He's someone at a time, as I chronicle in the book, is very fashionable at times. Goes to school wearing suits. You see, even on the cover here, at 6, he's got on the butterfly collar. You know what I mean? He's got this suit on. And then as he gets older, Coretta will point out that he kind of shies away from fashionable clothes because he recognizes that he's a symbol of the movement and he's worried about what people might think about him. So I would also describe him, while as committed, he's also open to change, right? He's always transforming. And I think all of us should to take a lesson from that we should always be open to change. And I think if we look at ourselves now and look at where we were when we were 12 and 13, I think we could see some of the same qualities in ourselves. So thank you, Kendall. Nancy, how did his relationship with Coretta begin? Do we get to see the early connection in the book? Absolutely. I have the longest chapter in this book is simply called Coretta. And I chronicle the moment that they are introduced, their first date, and how how their relationship develops. I use interviews that are not published from Coretta when she was talking about their relationship. I use letters that we have that they exchange back and forth to tell this story. And I'll tell you shortly, a sneak peek is that when he meets her, he's like, wow. He later will say that he looks at her and says, she is gorgeous. And he says, because he's into fashion at the time, he says, she could be the most beautiful woman in the world if she just got a little help on her clothes. That's what he'll say later. Coretta will say when she sees him pull up in the car to pick her up for their first date, he's got a little green Chevy his father bought him as a graduation present from his master's program. They're both in Boston. He just finished his PhD. She says he pulls up in the car, this little Chevy. She says she's thinking to herself, that man fits really well in that little bitty car. She's like, I don't know about this. He's probably really short and I like tall men. She says she gets in the car as they're driving over for their first date, and she says she's looking him over as he's driving, and she's like, "He's not very handsome, not very impressive." And so she says that during their conversation on that first date, they start talking about what they plan to do. King is doing his PhD. He's telling her he's going to be a minister who's going to he's going to try to work hard to overcome Jim Crow laws. She's in the conservatory practicing to be a musical performer, and she's thinking about the ways she can use art to help to transform America. And she says during this conversation, he starts becoming handsome because she's like, "Oh my God, we have so much in common. I've never met a minister who desires to impact his community like this man." And she says even then, she starts to become attracted to him, but she's playing it cool. And then he drops her off after their first date, and he turns to her and says, "You have everything I've ever wanted in a wife. When can I see you again?" And Coretta says she's like taken aback, but she says she plays it cool. And she says, "I don't know, but you may call me." And so that's how I open up the chapter. And I tell the rest of the book about how their dating relationship goes, the highs, the lows, the games they're playing with one another. King is 23 years old at the time. Coretta is 24. And they're going back and forth. And, you know, they're as early 20 somethings. No disrespect if you're early 20 on here. But, you know, they play some games with each other, admittedly so. And then eventually, of course, they get married about a year and 3 months after they meet. And so, more in the book. There's a whole chapter, the longest chapter in the book is called Coretta. And that's at the end because I wanted the book to end with him before he becomes famous. Like, this is who he is. And he's married, has met his life partner. And now they get to start life together. So that's the end of the book. So I appreciate that question, Nancy. Harry wants to know from someone who isn't super familiar with history books, does this read more like a story or more like a textbook? I would say, Harry, that it reads like a story. It's a narrative, lots of different stories. Harry, I'm a first generation college grad. And so when I write my books, I'm always thinking about my family members who didn't go to college. And I'm always thinking about how I can make this history relatable. So, Harry, I hope that you'll find when you read this, it's a collection of stories that's very readable. I wrote it so that my family would read it and enjoy it and understand it. I didn't write this book for other scholars. I wrote it for everyday people. I wrote it for people like myself, like my mother, like my brothers, like my sisters, to read it and understand it. So I hope that you'll agree with me that it's very readable. It's a narrative that just walks you through King's life from the first opening to his birth, all the way until when he and Coretta arrive at Montgomery. So I hope that when you get it, you'll enjoy it. Again, if you want to get the book, it's right here. It's available. You can click shop here on Talk Shop Live to get access to a signed copy. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click the link in the description. And on Facebook, if you type in the comment shop, it'll pop up. So I appreciate that question, Harry. Carol, why do you think this story, especially his early life, still matters so much right now? You know, Carol, I think it matters right now so much because um, we have to be reminded that our heroes come from somewhere. Our heroes aren't born, right? They're built, they're cultivated. And in a time in our country where it feels as if like young people don't have hope like they used to, or where young people are waiting for the next hero, we got to understand that heroes aren't born, they're built. And I think this story is so important because what my kids have taught me and taken me to see countless Marvel movies is that every superhero has a backstory. And you really can't understand the superhero without knowing the backstory. And so this is the backstory of Martin Luther King Jr. This tells a story about how he became so committed to impacting America and changing society. And so I hope that you'll find it inspirational in that regard for yourself and for your loved ones. That this is a story about how one grows and cultivates courage, commitment, even when one is not perfect, right? But one is still able to grow. And I think that that story is really important at this point in America. So thank you for your question. Candace, if readers take away just one thing from the young king, what do you hope it is? Oh man, I hope it's hope. Um, that a young person who doesn't quite know what they want to do with their life, a young person who messes up, takes their dad's car when he leaves his keys in it and crashes it. To my sons, don't get any ideas if you're watching this. Um, that there's hope, and that as long as you have a community that surrounds a young person and is committed to their growth and teaching them, there's hope. And so I hope that with this book at the end, the reader sees how young people and leaders are built, and it gives them hope. It gives them hope for themselves and gives them hope for their community and gives them hope for the young people in their lives. So that's what I hope, Candace. Rochelle has a very special question. Livingston and Benjamin want to know your favorite story about King's childhood that you would share with them. Shout out to my loved ones. I would say my favorite story about him is when he listens to his dad. No, my favorite story is probably when King is going through a hard time with the death of his grandmother, and his father remembers King crying and just being pretty upset. And it's a beautiful moment in the book. I try to channel where King's father talks about his attempt to comfort his son. And I think as a dad, my wife trying to make me emotional on this, but I think as a dad, thinking about trying to comfort your kids in a difficult time is really meaningful to me right now. Um, and King's father confesses that he's not able to quite do it. And he does his best, but King is still sad. And I think that's probably a really moving moment for me, even though it may seem sad, is that as a parent, you do as much as you possibly can. And there's nothing else left to do as long as you give it your all. And I think that's probably my favorite story because eventually King recovers and he ends up realizing um, that life does go on. So I think that's probably my favorite moment because you get a chance to see, you try to comfort your kids as much as possible, but you get a chance to also, while they're crying, you also get a chance to see them smile again. And I think that that's probably really meaningful to me right now. So I appreciate that question. Thank you for joining me again on Talk Shop Live. We're talking about my new book, Young King, comes out May 5th. I'm so excited about the book. Um, and if you're watching us right now on Talk Shop Live, thank you so much for joining us. You can click shop here on Talk Shop Live to get a signed copy of the book. If you're watching on Facebook, if you type in the comment shop, you'll get links for the order to get a signed copy. If you're on YouTube, click on the link in our description, and you'll also get an opportunity again to get a signed copy of the book. I'm so excited, and thank you all for joining me. So Jason asked, I always pictured Dr. King as this larger than life figure. What was most surprising to you most about who he was as a kid? Jason, I appreciate that question. You know what most surprises me? Is he was normal. Just a normal kid, running around, torturing his older sister. Christine says that he was a bullheaded brother at the time. She says he actually would take her Barbie dolls, dismember them, and then hide the pieces around the house and force her to find them so she could reassemble them, Jason. So I think for me, it's just like he's just this normal little brother who can be pestering at times. I think that really surprised me about Martin King. I think another aspect that surprised me about him is just that he was unsure. We see, as you point out, he's larger than life. We see images of him, videos where he seems so sure and so confident. But, in this book, you get a chance to see a kid who's not sure. He doesn't know what he wants to be. He doesn't know how he's going to change society. He's angry. He's sad, he's terrified. And so I think it's an opportunity to humanize him. And he's just a normal kid, the way Jason, I'm sure that you were, the way I was. And but yet his community, his family, the institutions around him helped him to grow and to become the man that we all know as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Gina, what's up, Gina? Gina wants to know, for those of us who don't know much about his childhood, how did growing up in Atlanta shape who he became later? It's a great question, Gina. Part of what shapes him about Atlanta is the wonderful world on Auburn Avenue. It's a chapter I have in here that just describes what King would have saw had he just walked outside of his house. So King has the benefit of being surrounded by Black-owned businesses, um, Black-owned restaurants, and in a world that's segregated, people who have money, like King's family, they're a middle class family, and people who don't are all living really close together. And so King had this wonderful experience of growing up, of being around lots of different people. And then, of course, Ebenezer Baptist Church is so important, which is like an extension of his house, which is also on Auburn Avenue. And being around Ebenezer, he got a chance to see how the church could serve people, not just talk about the hereafter, right? But he got a chance to see how Ebenezer and churches could serve people in terms of food, medical care, education, and seeing all that in his neighborhood, right? He didn't have to go far. It was on his street, Auburn Avenue. He got a chance to see all that. So I think that's what one aspect of what made growing up in Atlanta so special to him. So thank you for your question, Gina. Kent wants to know, what was his time at Morehouse College like? What was that? Were there things there that really started to click for him? Yes. At Morehouse, King struggles academically. He says about himself that he's probably reading at about an eighth grade level because he is at a segregated school, overcrowded. His high school has almost 5,000 people. Shout out to Booker T. Washington High School in Atlanta. It's the only high school at that time that accepts African Americans. Public high school accepts African Americans at that time. Overcrowded, not enough teachers, not enough room for all the kids. So King really struggles academically. His professors say that he's earnest, he tries really hard, he loves big words, but he just doesn't have the skills necessary to succeed. And I want to park there and just say that's important for us to remember, especially those who are involved in education, those who have children or loved ones, that you can have children who are really smart, really curious, have a strong desire to learn, but they don't have the requisite skills. That doesn't mean we give up on those kids. And King had professors who refused to give up on him. They all say that, that he tried really hard, but he was getting C's, even getting a D. He had to withdraw from his stats class, but he kept trying and he had professors who cared. So eventually King gets an A in one class and one class only at Morehouse, and it's a class called Bible. And King says that's the class that finally inspired him and helped him to understand, okay, so that I don't have to accept the Bible. King says that he realizes that while taking this class, he doesn't have to believe that the Bible is completely 100% historically accurate, but that there are moral truths in the stories about the Bible that he can learn from and that can shape his moral commitments. And that's what he does. And so in Morehouse, by the time he's a junior, he takes that class, he gets an A. He writes his first op-ed in the newspaper in the Atlanta Constitution, the Atlanta Journal at the time, and he takes off. And while he only graduates with a 2.4, 2.5, he's still elected to speak at the worship service for graduation, and he starts to take off. His letters of recommendation, I'll actually say this. We have his letters of recommendation at the King Institute, and his letters of recommendation from Benjamin Elijah Mays actually says King is right now an okay student, like a C average student. He's like, but I believe in the right environment, King could grow and become a great student. And that's exactly what happens. He goes off to his master's program at Crozer Theological Seminary and eventually takes off and starts getting A's. And so he's shaped by Morehouse profoundly. Morehouse is the place that gives him the academic tools and the ideas that help propel him on for the rest of his life. So thanks for that question, Kent. Henry, what's up, Henry? Henry, Henry asked, do you think understanding his younger years changes how we see his leadership later on? I do. I think it shapes us because we start to see that some of these ideas he has as an adult are instilled in him as a youngster. Let me give you an example. King says, as a young person, the angriest he'd ever been is when he's riding on a bus from Macon, Georgia, and he is forced to give up his seat because of Jim Crow laws. He's 15 years old. It's April 1944. King says he's so angry he refuses. And I chronicle this in the book. And the bus driver gets out of his seat and starts cursing at King. And King's with one of his teachers, Miss Sarah Grace Bradley. And she's begging him, please get up, please get up. You know, everyone knows what happens to Black people at this time in Georgia who refuse to abide by these rules. Being arrested is the least of their worries, right? They're beaten up and sometimes murdered. And King is sitting there, he refuses to get up. And eventually, his teacher's begging him, eventually he gets up. So, and he gives up his seat and he says it's the angriest he'd ever been. He has to stand the next 70 miles home. And think about that. So when King encounters the bus boycott in Montgomery, this is not a new concept for him. He's experienced the segregation and the pain and the degradation and the embarrassment that comes with having to give up one seat. So I think that that's just one example that I chronicle lots in this book about how these young moments for him will shape him later on. And I think if you read it, whether you know King's story or not, when you read this book, you'll get a chance to see how some of these experiences as a young person really, really shape him and shape his leadership. And finally, I'll say the story I tell about when he loses his friends at 6. King wrestles with this question when his parents tell him, you are somebody, don't worry about racism. It's not what God says about you, but you have to love them. And King wrestles with that question until his dying day. What does it mean to love one's enemies? And King decides what it means to love one's enemies is to love them, is to protest when things are wrong, non-violently protest. All of that is shaped, right, when he's a child. And he thinks about this question for the rest of his life. So thank you for that, Henry. I really appreciate that. Harry, what do you think people will find most surprising or even unexpected about young MLK? I think they'll find surprising that he goes off to Connecticut and picks tobacco. And I chronicle this. I think people will be surprised that how transformative, as you'll see in the book, this moment is for him in Connecticut. It's the first time he's outside of the Jim Crow South, first time he's away from his parents, and the first time that we know King preaches. He writes home in a letter, he says, I've been elected the religious leader of my cohort here at Morehouse, and I'm giving lessons from the Bible. I think people will be surprised by that how much that shaped him. I think people will be surprised that when he arrived, as you'll see in the book, when he arrives at Connecticut, King is actually says he's an atheist, or excuse me, he's an agnostic. He's so angry about the racism that he's seen. He's so upset about the violence, the racist violence he's seen. That he's like, there can't be a God. And if there is, I'm just not sure if there is a God because it's just so ridiculous what I'm seeing. He says that he even in Sunday school, this is the child of the pastor. In Sunday school, he starts doubting the Bible and even doubts the resurrection of Jesus. Of course, it's a huge scandal that I chronicle in the church when he says this. So I think people will be surprised by that. And then they'll be surprised about how being in Connecticut, he says, changed him. And then finally, he goes back to Connecticut 3 summers later, and he's stopped by the police. And that also profoundly shapes him and how he understands police brutality. And I chronicle that in the book as well. So thank you for that question. Candace, what are all those books behind you? Oh, Candace, I appreciate that. Candace, this is just part of our library here. So we got my books here, Young King, and the rest of these books you'll see around me are all books that deal with the civil rights movement. Some aspect of the civil rights movement that I've used in my own work, that I've used in previous books, and that we use here at the King Institute to do our work to contextualize King's papers, to provide context to that, and to the wonderful staff that's here that we work on publishing King's papers. And we're working on right now, everyone, digitizing his papers. So you'll get a chance to see the actual images of documents of Martin Luther King Jr. that we're working on putting them online on our website to make them accessible to everybody. We want everybody, whether it's through Young King here or if it's through our website, to really have a conversation with Martin Luther King Jr. We don't we don't imagine everyone's going to agree with everything that they read, but it's an opportunity to let the lessons of history inform us and shape us so that as we go into our future, we go into it not sort of wandering in the dark, but we go into it with the knowledge of the success and failures of those who came before us. So I hope you'll get a chance both through Young King and as we're working diligently here at the King Institute to digitize our papers, we'll do that. So thank you. Again, oh, we have one last question. In your journey of writing this book, and now that it's finally here, what are you most personally proud of as an author, dad, and MLK professor director? Oh man, uh, I'm thankful for my family and supporting me. Um, you know, when you are writing a book or any type of project, and then all of us know this, when you're at your job, any type of project, whether it's a book, a report, a document, it's not just you, right? It's all the teachers you've had who've shaped you, all the mentors. It's the family and friends who care for you through the process, who listen to you endlessly talk about it as you're doing it. So I'm thankful for my family, my teachers. Shout out to Fostoria Senior High School and all the Fostoria City school system that shaped me. I'm thankful for that. Um, I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to tell this story. I'm thankful to Coretta Scott King for starting the King Papers Project, which I now direct and oversee. I'm thankful to all the souls who've worked in this project over the years prior to me. I'm thankful for the staff that works here now. The staff, there's 9 of us here. I'm thankful for each and every one of you. And I'm excited to have the book done, and I'm sure my family is too that is done. And I'm just thankful that I had the opportunity to write it, and I hope that each and every one of you, I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you learn something from it. Hope it makes you laugh. Hope it makes you think. Hope it moves you. And then hope it inspires you. So, Young King out May 5th. You can get a signed copy of the book if you like by clicking shop here on Talk Shop Live. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, click the link in the description. If you're on Facebook, comment shop and you'll get a chance to get the link to get a signed copy. Let's see, Megan, how did King's siblings shape his personal philosophy? That's a great question. Um, King says, and I chronicle this, and I can relate to this. Shout out to my older sisters. King chronicles and says that he had a constant desire to keep up with his older sister. So they used to play word games. They used to they would look up words in the dictionary or the encyclopedia and try to spell them and then challenge one another. Like, can you spell this word? And so King's older sister shaped him in a sense of like a desire to read and to learn. So it was a friendly sibling rivalry, if you will. So King says he always was trying to keep up with her. So Christine shapes him in that regard. And they are run parallel for their entire lives. King ends up having the opportunity to test into college early at Morehouse at the end of his junior year. Morehouse, a lot of loses enrollment because men are fighting in World War II. They need students. They have a test. King takes the test, passes it. So King ends up going into college at the same time as his older sister. And so while she's at Spelman, he's at Morehouse, and the competition continues. They're trying to outdo one another and get good grades. And so I think that sibling rivalry, which was friendly, shaped his philosophy of always wanting to learn. King is a reader. King wants to learn. And even though he doesn't get great grades at first, he's always seeking to learn. He wants to learn words. He wants to learn new ideas, new concepts. And some of that is influenced by Christine, who's a great student herself and goes off to go a master's degree at Columbia University. So I think just that sibling rivalry shapes him profoundly. So I think we're just about at time. I want to thank all of you for joining me. This was an absolute pleasure. It's my first time doing anything like this, but it was really fun. I want to thank you for all your questions. Again, Martin Luther, Young King, new book coming out May 5th. You can get it um, uh, uh, through Talk Shop Live, signed copy. You can click shop here. If you're watching us on YouTube, click on the description. You can get a link to get a signed copy. If you're on Facebook, type the comment shop and you'll get links as well. We'll get you a signed copy of the book. Thank you all for coming. If you want to keep track of us and our work, the MLK Institute, we have a Facebook page. We also are on Instagram, where we update periodically, giving you not just history on Martin Luther King Jr. and his papers, but the broader civil rights movement. So follow us there. You can follow me on Instagram as well, Lerone Martin. Keep track of me and the work that I'm doing and the book tour we have coming up for Young King. I'll be traveling around the country at various bookstores from here all the way over to DC, from the Bay Area to DC over the next couple weeks, traveling to talk about this book. So I'll be coming to a bookstore near you. We'll be posting on Instagram every place I'll be going, so you get a chance to see that. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining, and thank you for your amazing questions. And again, Young King, I'm excited. Pick it up. It's written for a broad audience. It's a great book, and I hope that you both enjoy it, but are also inspired by it as it inspired me to write it. So thank you all. Much love. And as King would say, one love. All right. Thank you.